Hey, folks.
Hey, what's up, man?
Not much. Beautiful.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Tone Table. This is our new podcast. I'm Rotem Sivan.
I'm Kevin Jordan.
And thanks for joining us. This is a podcast about all things guitar.
And things that are interesting to guitar players.
Yes.
Rotem, I had a question for you.
Yes.
What you just played, if you had to grade yourself out of 10, what would you give? What would you give that? Because okay, how about this? Before you think about what you're going to give yourself, and I will give you a score that I think it is. So don't tell me yet, but do you know what it is in your head?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you what I think.
Yeah.
I think that was an 8.5.
Oh, wow. I'm thinking more like 2.7.
So there's what it is, and then there's the thing that you think it is. And then there's also like the gap between like where you are and what you think greatness is, which I think is like not only for guitarists but people in general. Like we try to we don't want to be too negative, you don't want to be too positive. I think there's something there, but why did you give yourself a 2?
Well, I mean, I'm trying to connect to music and sounds, but I also was a little aware of me trying to connect to music and sounds. And I guess like I'm usually pretty critical about my playing, which is good and bad. So I don't really like to talk like to grade myself in that sense and like to like be like, oh, this was good or this was bad. I try not to, but if I have to, like you put me on the spot, and then I'm like, yeah, I can fix, or I can see how this could be done better. I mean, again, this was just an improv, like really random, and I was trying to connect to it, but and I did at points, but yeah, I'll be curious to hear it. I mean, one of the things that for me, like, I remember like starting to go to jam sessions in New York. So I'm based here in Brooklyn, New York for a while. And when I just was in school and after graduating, I was like, okay, I'm going to try to go to jam sessions. And it was really stressful for me. And I remember like going and always feeling like I played the worst, and maybe I did. But then I realized I can record. So I used to like just take my phone and like voice memo the whole night. So I had like, 7-hour voice memos where I, play one song at like 4 a.m. And then I go back home and then I listen to it on the subway. And then I'll be like, okay, I'm really happy because I felt like I need to like jump off a cliff. But actually I need to practice some things, but it's like better than what I thought. So there is always a discrepancy, I guess, between what you feel and how things are. So yeah, it's really helpful to record yourself to have reality. It happens all the time, like, cause like, yeah, with recording, it's just like, it's kind of amazing. If I'm by myself, if I need to record something by myself, it's the worst because I'll do like, sometimes like, yeah, I can get obsessed about something and then I'll do so many takes and then I'm listening to all of them after and then I'll be like, actually the first take was cool. And I remember like being like in this, wormhole of like just doing it again and again for 20 times, whatever. Like if it's just like something for an album and I literally go and listen for half an hour of the same, like maybe some idea that I was trying to work on because it's solo guitar. And then I'm like, yeah, the first one was cool.
I think what's interesting about that is like, I'm not a professional musician. I love to play.
But you're good. You can play.
Oh, thanks.
Sure.
So I play a lot, but in a way, I think my perspective is a little more freeing in a way because in terms of like my ability to be free, because like I at the end of the day, I don't care.
That man, that's really good, man. And yeah, go ahead. But I
Yeah.
have something to say about that.
But with that being said, is like I totally get it in the pursuit of excellence and like trying to be great at something, and you want to be this, you want to be that, but in order to get there in a positive way that is not like Whiplash, like that movie where it's like, negative reinforcement, we throw a chair at you, like none of
Yeah.
that stuff.
None of that.
But in terms of like my best playing as like a hobbyist, if you will, is like I play my best when I don't practice, which is weird because because I'm not like stuck in a box. I'm not stuck playing the same things. The best version of my playing is like over the holidays when I don't play.
Yeah.
And then like I pick it up after like, traveling and whatever. And then I was like, ooh, that's a new idea. I haven't come up with that before. Or like, it's interesting where depending on where you're at, I find for me in terms of creative output, you just have to not care. And that's so hard. So it seems like setting and place is so important,
Yeah, man, it's amazing you're saying it because so I care a lot, and usually if we had this conversation maybe 2 months ago, I would say like, no, man, that's like not true. Like you have to like, and I love learning, so I practice and I learn a lot of music all the time, most of the time. On December 28th, my baby boy of then 6 months was admitted to the hospital, and we're still there. He's fighting a cancer, brain cancer, so it's really hard situation. But I'm bringing it up because I didn't play basically since December 28th, so it's been like, a month and a half that I'm not really playing, compared to what I used to play. And, I cancel all the shows. I'm just there. We're just there 24/7. And, but I did have a session a couple of days ago here, like with some friends for like an hour and a half, stopped by from the hospital. And, I don't really practice there. Like, I mean, maybe I pick up the guitar for like 20 minutes when I can, but it's not really the usual schedule, and definitely no shows. And, it's like not a musical environment, which is fine. But I will say that session was really fun. And more than fun, I felt like I played better. And I was like, wait, how's this possible? I'm literally not doing anything. I'm like literally not practicing, but like, and my bodies were like, man, you kind of killed it. Like, I was like, really? And like, yeah, it's just, you sound like crazy. I was like, what? And I was like, and I did feel kind of free. I think the idea of not caring, and especially when with music, we care so much, and a lot of us care. I mean, and I don't want not to care, but I think the too much caring also can like stress out. And maybe in a different reality 2 months ago, if you'd be like, hey man, just play something, I might have done this intro like 12 times. But now I was like, I don't care that much. I'm not gonna rate myself as like high numbers, like, but I'm still like, I'm like, oh, it's fine. It's like, it's just like something, so not caring is a big deal. I had to figure it out because I literally don't care now because the balance changed. But if you can apply that without having your family members sick, that's better.
Yeah, man, that's so tough. I can't, I'm a father as well, and I can't imagine, what you're going through. But, we're all here for you, and
Thank you.
whatever you need, brother.
Thanks, man.
Happy to help.
It's nice to see you and hang out and talk a little bit.
Of course, and I'm sure, some of your viewers might know about everything that's going on, and you said you were telling me like the response was a bit overwhelming. So thank you all. Who,
it's amazing. Yeah, it's really amazing. I mean, my wife and I were not sure how to go about it, but eventually, I decided that by talking about it, it will be easier, and we can also learn more, which was really amazingly helpful. So I put out a video just a couple of weeks ago, just saying the situation and asking for information. So hundreds of people emailed me back, and of course also DMs and messages. It was really overwhelming, but also we went over every link and every email. We went through everything and reached out to every professional that was interesting in his case for the situation. And we learned a tremendous amount of information. We also got connected to really very specialized people in that world. And we also had a chance to talk with different parents that were going through a similar situation, which was really helpful because we, of course, felt very alone and disconnected. And we know nothing about cancer, and we just became parents. So this is all quite shocking. So your response and that help was very meaningful. So thank you. Yeah.
Something that I think that's interesting between like pure art versus being a professional. So I'm a filmmaker. One of the best experiences of my life is I worked on this movie, and it got picked up, and they were going to have a premiere in Japan and in Europe and these different places. But that was on the side. Like I would do stuff professionally, meaning like with companies and with clients, and then you have reviews, you have these systems in place to like check things.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming similarly in music, same deal. Like you have these things you have to do. But the thing that was interesting about this movie I did was the guy was a pure artist, meaning he was just chasing the vision of what he wanted to create.
Yeah.
We're having a premiere in San Francisco, and he said, "Oh, this needs to be done tomorrow." I thought we had 2 weeks.
Wow.
So I was like, "Oh, I'm barely done. Oh, I guess I'm just gonna release it." And
Wow.
at that point, like they literally saw my version 1.
That's crazy. Yeah.
And
It's like the rough. It's like, oh yeah, I just wrote a song here. Here's like recorded this out. I was like, what? It's like this.
but kind of what you were telling me earlier, it was like once I got over that idea, I was like, oh, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And for better, for worse, it doesn't matter.
Did you like the end result? Did you like the version 1?
At first I didn't, and then I saw the audience reaction and stuff like that. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, it's fine. It's great, actually.
Yeah.
You know?
That's really interesting because like I think bringing things, the difference between like 97% and 100% is probably like 500% more time, and bringing things to whatever 94, 97% is already a lot, but bring it to that extra couple of points, it's insane amount of work. And I think it's good to do it sometimes, but for a lot of people, it also kind of inhibits them from creating. I have a bunch of friends that are like incredible musicians, and some of them haven't recorded their kind of own album. And of course they can, 'cause they tour all over the world all the time, and they're incredible musicians, but they just didn't do it because they're like, oh yeah, I'm not sure. Or like different things of that nature, or like some of my buddies kind of want to do like YouTube. And I'm like, and I do some YouTube. I mean, I'm not like professional, I kind of do it. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm figuring it out. And I'm kind of stumbling forward, I would say. But I think a lot of these things is just kind of like doing it, and then, yeah, I know that my videos are not all on point. Things go wrong, and
well.
I'm like, okay. I just like, okay, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna put it out, not ready, basically. Oh yeah, the color, I messed it up. Oh yeah, the audio is not great. I was like, oh, okay, next time, hopefully I remember. But kind of like being okay with not being perfectionist with some things. Again, with music, I think that the idea is like you practice and you learn, and things get better and you get more comfortable, but still being okay with not being a perfectionist for the sake of doing, and definitely having that not inhibiting exactly,
Yeah.
as from the action. Yeah.
In terms of like where you're at, and if somebody wants to become more free, become more creative, kind of unleash like their potential, based on like how you grew up learning music. And I would assume my upbringing was here in the US. Like I grew up in California, but in general, like when I saw that movie Whiplash, I kind of connected with that because that reminded me of my band director in high school.
Wow.
I mean, he wasn't like physically abusive, but like in terms of like emotionally abusive, like he totally
You were playing
stuck
trumpet
it to
then?
you. I was playing, yeah. So I grew up a horn player, and my band director was also a horn player. He actually used to like be in New York City clubs as a trumpet player.
Yeah.
Then he moved out to California, became like a band leader at my high school. But yeah, he had that like kind of negative reinforcement way of teaching,
I mean, it's awful.
which
It's just really sad, you know. It's just
it
like it's not about that. Yeah.
it's not about that at all. But like in terms of like the output, sure, I like was forced to learn in a regimented, fear-based way. But like looking forward though, like how would you go about that like today if you were to like teach somebody?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big discussion that I'm keen to try and talk about and articulate. I mean, first, I think a lot of us lose a lot of energy and time being negative in that sense. You know, if you think about your mind is a CPU processor, and you're trying, you know, you're playing a chord. Okay, you're just kind of playing a chord. And instead of just like playing the chord and listening to the sound, you're like, this is a cool chord, you know. Okay. Instead of that, you're saying like, oh man, this is the worst chord in the universe. I'm the worst individual, and you know, this is the worst sounding chord in the world. So that's thinking of the action and not really listening, you know. So you're already kind of taking an outside perspective. The same thing if you're saying this is the most like, oh, I'm the best guitar player, whatever you say, and like if it's like a judgmental action, you know, this is not helpful to the learning process the way I see it, because you're just losing CPU power to like go to these kind of thoughts, negative or positive, and usually it's negative. And instead of that, like what, you know, I'm trying to do is like saying like, okay, you know, I play this chord, or you know, like, and it was like not the chord I wanted, but I can still be like, okay, what am I hearing? What is the sound? Or you know, how can I listen to this and sort of like learn from the sound instead of me being saying like, oh, I messed this chord up, I'm the worst. I'm like, okay, this is an interesting sound. It's not what I wanted, but what I need is just here, you know. So the process for me, I'm trying, and this is, you know, not innocent, but I'm trying to have that mindset of listening to the sounds as sounds and trying to absorb the music as much as possible versus kind of like judging myself as the action happens. There's a great book, it's called, well, it's like a tennis book. You know that one?
A tennis book? No, I don't know this.
It's called The Game of Tennis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Aptly named.
And it's basically that conversation. I mean, it's a little more in depth, but it's basically, you know, instead of judging the action while you do it, you want to do the action. You know, you're trying to hit the ball, just hit the ball. You know, you're trying to play the chord, play the chord. Don't be like, I'm trying to play the chord the best way. No, just play the chord. You know, so a lot of times we lose a lot of energy in that process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think like it totally makes sense, but I can't help but connect with it. I think it all circles back to like not caring, right? Like being able to let go and not care. It's like, yeah, that might happen, might not happen.
Yeah,
just do it.
It's true. It's really that. And I guess if I had to teach myself from the beginning, I would say I would, you know, trying to have that attention to the sound and the purity of music, if that makes sense. So I'm just listening to the sound, the chord, and trying to absorb the beauty of it instead of trying to know everything and trying to like be correct and play all the scales. I mean, of course, scales are great, but scales are just structures of sound. And if we just know C major scale in a very honest way, we can do a lot. And I think this is the place a lot of people fall. They kind of try to do everything instead of saying like, what do I like? What do I like in music? What am I trying to do? And what information do I actually need in order to create? And the second half of it, in a way, is why you're playing guitar, because you probably want to create. So you don't need to be a master of C major scale. Nobody's like, man, Kevin, you should hear him play C major scale. You know, nobody said that, right, ever. But people would be like, man, Kevin, oof, that solo is killing, you know? And that is because it's a creative output. So I think a lot of people, especially in the beginning, are like, no, I'm just going to play all the chords, I'm going to play all the scales, and then I'm going to create. And I'm like, no, that's not the way. It's kind of like saying like, let me memorize all the words without understanding how to create a sentence. That doesn't make any sense. You want to right away be flexible with the information. You know, 8 notes, 7 notes, and an octave, so 8 notes. C major scale. These notes. That's it. Let's create something. I'm using these notes in a somewhat creative way, right? Just for a second. But that means that I'm listening, that I'm paying attention, and therefore I'm learning. And I think if I were to tell my, self in middle school something like how to go, it'd be like, listen, create, and don't worry, just do it.
I very much agree with everything that you said, but then there are certain things that I've also learned in my musical upbringing of how to like trick your mind to like do certain things. Because I'm very stubborn. In fact, I'm lazy. Like, I just don't want to do more work than I need to. Like, I'm just built like that, for better, for worse. And with music, my big thing was like, I just hated doing scales. Like, when I played the trumpet, we would play, all the scales, learn every single key, and I was just bored. Like, I was just like, that's just a very technical exercise.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until my music teacher told me, kind of reframed it and was like, hey, the reason why we do these things is because it's not because we want you to master it. It's because the more and more you drill the fundamentals, the more and more, if you're, listening, you will understand and unlock other things.
Yeah.
So after he explained that to me, I was like, what's he talking about? Then I would start playing and then I would realize like, oh, I'm not playing evenly. Or, oh, that's what the transition between G to A when I'm playing, at least the trumpet, like, oh, there's something there. So it's like, sure, you could play it, but then you start getting real micro about everything a part of what that exercise represents. And then the cherry on top that he told me was, now apply that melodically, So I think a lot of it is like, at least for me, it was unclear, kind of like all schooling, to be honest, is like, I didn't understand the utility of a lot of it. Like, for example, math. It's like, when am I going to learn? When am I going to use this, like, in my real life? And more often than not, it didn't. But I think the good teachers try to, like, shine a light and be like, this is just a way for you to learn how to learn.
Exactly. Exactly. It's learning structures and systems. That's what I think. And the idea of, and that's why music is not just for music. Music is for life, but really it is, because it's like the idea of how to communicate with big pieces of information, to dissect them into smaller pieces, and to understand how to do something with them. And that happens with everything you do. If it's language, if it's relationships, everything, it's basically complex systems that you need to understand how to kind of like maneuver between this chaotic thing and make sense out of it a little bit.
Totally.
And when you're playing scales, you're starting to understand patterns and repetition the same way as language. You folks understand hopefully what we're saying because we're using the same words that right? We're triggering information that makes sense to you. And music is the same way. These building blocks, scales, arpeggios, chords are sounds that we kind of like conglomerates of colors that we assemble together in order to create meaning. And the repetition of that element creates meaning. That's why people like the pentatonic scale, for example. The scale has 5 notes, so the repetition is higher, so it's easier to relate. That's how I see it. So I think the idea of working on fundamentals, on elements that are the building blocks of creation is super important, and to know them on a kind of like almost intuitive way so they're a part of your system is helpful.
And I actually think that's, when I met Rotem, like that's what I noticed right off the bat, which is super interesting to me, who doesn't do this for a living, but like in terms of what I do for a living, it's the same outlook. Like I truly think that you don't need, like, it's weird because my expectation, like meeting you, was, oh, you're going to show me like all the crazy stuff, like all the crazy jazz. But no, like it starts with the fundamentals. And of course it does.
Yeah.
Because that's all you need, actually. More I think about it, it's like that's all you really need is just the fundamentals. And anything on top of that is a combination of those fundamentals. Right?
Yeah. I mean, again, if you know C major scale really well, but I'm saying really well, you understand the relationship between each note, each two notes, three notes, four notes. So you understand the relationship between all the chords. So you can basically play any song. You know,
Yeah.
that's the end of, and then the chromatic notes but they relate to C major scale, so it still makes sense. You know, when you play secondary dominants or different chords that lead to chords in C, well, it's still C. You know, so if you know C, you know music. That's the kind of bottom line of it, you know? So these 7, 8 notes and the relationship between them, that's huge, you know? So I mean, I always work on the fundamentals, if that makes sense. You know, having like a drone and kind of imagining the sounds, you know, just kind of like, how does that sound? How does that feel? And I like the idea of the conversation of talking about feel, because music at the end of the day is about feeling and emotions. We're kind of like painting with colors and sounds, right? And
When were you first? When did you first feel the feeling of music and not the technical of music, or like what? Because I could tell you where you just reminded me of the
yeah,
moment for me when I felt music, like truly.
tell me.
It's the first time I smoked weed.
I love it.
I was in college.
Yeah,
I was listening to the solo for Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix.
yeah,
And I remember sitting there, and then I was hearing that solo on headphones very high. And I was just like, I'm seeing into his soul. Like like I felt it and I could see it and feel it. And that's when it didn't matter what the notes were, but it was more like the energy transfer that he was doing,
Yeah.
and building this thing up to in a constructed way to reach this moment where I was like, holy shit.
yeah, yeah,
And that's kind of fun. And not to like condone drugs or anything, but like truly, like, because honestly, like, I think what that did for me was I relaxed. I let go of control. I didn't care.
yeah.
And then I remember I was jamming, and this is probably horrible looking back because we had neighbors in a small apartment complex. I had two drum sets in my apartment, two giant amps, a bass amp in there too, and we're just jamming. And after I listened that we're jamming, I just actually was playing C major, and then I was like, "This is awesome." Because I never really listened to it. Like,
Yeah.
just like, a C power chord, it sounded great.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, well, I think one of my earlier memories with music is just like me being a kid and when my parents were not home and I was just kind of like staying home by myself when I was just very young. They went out and I was just alone, and I remember like playing music I knew well to kind of like calm myself down and go to sleep, basically. So I remember, like, I guess my parents probably listened to like Leonard Cohen and
Beatles?
Beatles, and I mean there were a few kind of like, my parent Randy Newman was a great,
Oh,
like,
Randy Newman.
and
Right.
I was like yeah, I remember like not understanding the lyrics, but just like it just was so relaxing to me. And I remember using music in that kind of way to just calm me down and just like kind of like, okay, I'm home, it's all good.
Yeah.
I didn't understand any word of these lyrics, but it just was kind of emotional in that way. I mean, Stairway to Heaven, and stuff like that later on. Again, just kind of like starting to understand guitar, but just like the excitement and listening to people like even like shredders like Joe Satriani, or like, just like, whoa, what's going on there? I don't know, but it's just like a lot of energy. And then classical music was hitting very hard for me as well. And I remember kind of listening to Mozart Requiem was a big one that I again, back in the day I didn't understand, but just listening to it and shedding tears. And then later on I got the score and I learned a lot of what's happening there actually, and the lyrics and how it works, what is the structure, the double fugue, everything that's happening in that piece. But it's just like listening to something and it hits your soul, and being like, I don't know, 14 or something, and understanding that that's like a universe of sound. It's just like another galaxy that is there, and I don't know what's happening there, and I wanted to be a part of it. That was exciting for me. just like understanding that I don't know anything about it, but it's like a magical world that I want to learn about.
Yeah, I think with that kind of outlook, which I feel the same, is like, to me, that's very inspirational. Like, I think there's certain players, like when I hear Jimi Hendrix, when I hear certain guitar players that I love,
Yeah.
Derek Trucks, like there are certain people who are guitar players who hear that and they get like sad. They're like, like they get bummed out. Like I can't.
It's too good.
It's like, I can't ever do that. For me, it's more like if he could do it, I could do it. He's a human, I'm a human.
I mean, yeah, and I like that, and I think it's also interesting. Like I remember Googling a couple of weeks ago. It's like who's the best guitar players in the world. I'm just curious who people say, and like I guess Google and I guess people say Jimi Hendrix, and I was like, it's an interesting answer because for me, I mean, he's an incredible artist, an incredible guitar player, or I would say incredible artist, but he's not a great guitar player. I mean, he's very good, but I mean, technically, I mean, there are monsters that just would eat him alive, right? He's a great artist, but technically, again, he's good and it's not easy, but he's not the best guitar players in the world, technically, right? But again, I understand why people say it because they connect to the emotion and they connect to the music he's creating a lot. But just, it's an interesting kind of answer to me. It's kind of like saying like, I don't know, the Beatles are the drummer is the best drummer. It's like, no, he's a great drummer for that group. But it's like, if we compare him to Elvin Jones or like masters of drums, Dave Weckl, if you want to like somebody more technical, but he doesn't stand a chance, which is fine. But it's just like, we need to understand what we mean,
Yeah,
and
the definition.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because with that, it's kind of like, because I fully agree. Is like I guess that's the thing. Like there's a little bit, and I'm curious where, people and also you, like where do you fall on how important is it to be the best technical versus like the best that connects, right? Like I think that's something to consider because people have their different lines of what that means to you.
Yeah.
Right. Like, because funny enough, like for me, if it's too technical, even like, I don't know, even like Momstein or like, some stuff like
Yeah.
that. Like to me, it gets too chaotic and noisy and busy for me.
Yeah.
Not to say that it's bad, but in terms of like, what do I want to listen to?
Yeah.
Sometimes not even sometimes, I rarely want to ever listen to that stuff.
I get it. I understand. Yeah, it's a big question. I mean,
But it's like highly respectable. I totally give all that stuff. But when it comes to like listenability, like I could listen to Jimmy, like I could just be on, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, totally.
So, I think maybe that has something to do with it a little bit in terms of maybe why people say that. Because I think you're right. People just connect with certain artists who it's not really about guitar as much as it is, I guess, about music.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm interested to just expand on what you're saying about he's a human and I can do it, which I like a lot. I think a lot of people learning music and guitar and just whatever genre we are in, put kind of people on pedestal, and I understand that as well, and I do it sometimes, but I try to avoid it because I think we can learn more if we don't do that. If I'm listening to Jimi Hendrix, I can be like, oh, he's the best in the world. The sound is perfect and it's unachievable. And it's like every line, like, yeah, it's really great. But instead of that, I can be like, okay, let me try to understand what he's doing. Or I can say that about anybody. I can listen to Coltrane and be like, he's the most genius that ever lived. But instead of that, I can just be like, okay, what sounds good in this? Let's be more specific. Okay, so the tone. What about the tone sounds good? What about the tone of Jimi Hendrix you like? What do you connect there? The distortion. Okay, what kind of distortion? It's really bright and like, but it's kind of crank. Okay, talk to me. Like, explain to me exactly what's happening. And the same thing in kind of like reverse way or reverse engineering, talking about your playing. So recording yourself, and instead of saying like, going back to how we started the conversation, instead of saying like, oh, I'm the worst guitar player that was ever created in the universe, I can be like, okay, so this solo has, I don't really like the guitar tone. I don't really like how I started solo, but we can talk about specific things, instead of like saying this is trash, this is a disaster, we can say this is good, this is bad, this needs work. And that's a very different conversation when we talk about ourselves as musicians and guitar players, and probably in any other field, right? If you're trying to run a marathon and you're practicing, or like you're going on a run and you run like 1K and you're destroyed, you can't do it, you just stop. You're not gonna be like, I'm the worst human. No, you're gonna be like, okay, I need to practice, and it might take like 2 years for me to be able to run 10K or 15 or 20K, and it's okay. That's fine. And that's kind of like my approach. And it's exactly not putting, BB King or Jimi Hendrix or Brad Mello on a pedestal, being like, they're amazing, they're like incredible, and maybe some of them are geniuses, but what can I learn from that, and how can I relate to that emotionally and musically? How can I take things from that?
And that's reminding me a little bit of like identity, like, and style, because one thing I've heard about music, and also something that you just reminded me about film, things that I do, is with music. I heard a quote, I forgot who it was, but like, what your style is everything you can't do. Like, which I think is a great way to do it. For me, when I grew up playing the guitar, like, I grew up in the era in Southern California. So like my biggest influences were the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Incubus, and emo music. That's what I listened to.
Nice.
And
Love
in doing that, I studied some of those players, and I was like, I couldn't do certain things. And then it wasn't until later where I just dropped those things. I was like, okay, I guess this is how I sound, and I kind of embraced what I couldn't. I was like, again, that whole idea of like letting go of preconceptions and just being yourself.
Yeah.
But like whatever it is, to like kind of find your way to get a taste of what that is, of like being free. I think allows you to relax and kind of like sit into what you want to do naturally. And in a roundabout way, this reminded me of a good friend of mine. He's a screenwriter.
Yeah.
And there's a thing, I'm sure you may have heard of it, the Sundance Film Festival. It's a very famous film festival. They have a thing called Sundance Labs, where screenwriters who are selected get their scripts read by like real top screenwriters and directors from Hollywood, like famous directors, famous screenwriters. One thing he told me that I thought was super interesting and could apply to this was he would give his script to a renowned director.
Yeah.
They would read it. Give it to another director. They would read it. He would get feedback from one of them saying, this is the greatest thing ever. This is awesome. You should do this, this, and this. This is really great. Thank you so much. The other director would say, this is horrible. I don't like this. I don't like it for these reasons. This is what you need to work on. Blah, 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 blah. And then that's confusing, right?
Yeah, definitely confusing.
And for him, and the purpose of the program a little bit was to show him that feedback doesn't matter. It should reaffirm what you want to do with your art.
Wow, that's deep.
Because if you think about it, these are two well-established top-tier directors.
Yeah.
Giving you conflicting feedback.
Yeah.
So it all just points to whatever you're trying to do, whatever the feedback is, it should reaffirm what you want to do with your music, what you want to do with your film, what you want to do with whatever. And I took that to heart when I heard about that, because I think that applies to everything.
Yeah, but
in terms of creative freedom.
Yeah, of course. But we also want to be accepted. We want to, I just finished an album and that I'm very excited about, an album I wrote for my kids. And Ben Wendell's produced the album, and he's also playing on it. It's a very exciting album for me. And I'm kind of shopping around, just talking with a couple of labels. Just had some conversation with Nonsuch, which is a great label. But looks like it's not going to work out. And of course, I'm a little bummed. I was like, could be really exciting. They were really nice, and I thought it sounded really good, but it doesn't work out, and it's okay. But of course, I feel like I would feel very supported and very like, kind of like approval stamp if naturally like, yeah, let's do this, and of course they were really nice, and I'm happy to have the conversation and get feedback from them. It's totally great. But yeah, it's a different world if for me, emotionally speaking.
Totally.
If you get like, if Con Festival takes you, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand what you're saying, and of course I'm gonna keep going, and I'll put the music this way or another. Maybe
You bring up a good point though, because I think that's something that a lot of creatives and artists and musicians in general struggle with is like there is a blurry line between art and commerce, right? Like you have to be able to feed yourself and your family, of course, of course. But then you also need to make art. I remember when I first took my first job in my field ever, I thought it was weird I was getting paid for doing something that I just liked doing. I just thought that was weird.
Yeah.
Because I would do it for free, right? We all would want to maybe do it for free. So, and that's where it gets real. I think that's tough for certain artists for sure. If you have more of an artist, pure art mindset. But as you know, it's complicated.
It's complicated,
if you want to put business and commerce in it, one would say it's sellouts. I would say it's a compromise. I would say this is not art, it's commerce. There's different ways to kind of reframe certain things, and that's real gray. That's a spectrum.
Yeah, totally. I hear you.
With that, I had an idea. Let's see if this could be a thing.
Sure.
Why don't we end each episode with kind of one quick tip or thing about guitar? It could be a product, a technique, something that you learned. Just this will be a little pre-planned in the future, but for now, maybe off the cuff, if you could think of one thing.
I have something.
All right. Perfect. I don't. Let me think about it while you do yours.
So one thing that's really interesting, and that's applicable for a lot of players, especially for, I would say, intermediate and beginner players. So when people start playing guitar and trying to solo and trying to play chords, bar chords, a lot of people are kind of it's really hard, and I understand it's heavy and uncomfortable and you can't do it and everything sounds a disaster. One thing that you can do to make your life easier is the following. So if you look at I'll just move a little bit. If you look at the board here, so if I'm playing if I'm playing this note, let's say I'm playing this G, you see where my finger is? It's pretty close to the fret. In fact, it's almost on the fret. So this is the fret, right? And my finger is really here. And I didn't know I'm doing it until way later, but basically it's easier to play a note here than here. So I need significantly more power to play here, and you hear that sound. It's kind of breaking a little bit almost. So I need way more power to move the string here than I need here. So if I'm playing a bar chord, I would basically, you see my finger is really almost on the metal. It's just as close as possible. And that makes it significantly easier than this. I have to spend way more energy and force if I want to put it in the middle of the bar. And just by sliding the finger closer to the bar, you get so much more, I guess, in the US you would say money for your buck. But I guess just you get more mileage, right? You save a lot of energy. And I think that's a really helpful thing. The other thing that connects to that, I would say, is where you play and where you place your pick. So a lot of people, when they start playing and they kind of play in the middle or to the side, and that's more energy. And the same thing here, they would play really close to the bridge, which it's a cool sound, it's kind of bright, but I need to utilize way more energy to make the string happen. Whereas if I just move the pick a little closer to the board, I get a warmer sound. It's easier to produce it. So of course it depends on what you want. There's no one way to do it, but just by being aware of where you're placing your finger on the fret itself, and same thing here between the bridge and the neck. It's a good kind of thing to be aware of what sound you like and how much tension you're applying.
Very cool. Yeah. That resonates with me because, again, like I said, I'm very lazy, and that looks like cool. Less work, better result. And I actually think that's, my trumpet teacher told me he defined that as finesse, being able to have finesse when you play. That just means just use as much as you need.
Yeah,
which makes sense.
Yeah,
I need to work on that.
We all do.
For me, I don't really have anything guitar related. The one thing I was thought of is actually that plugin that I told you about, Clear. Supertone's Clear. So this is for like the audio engineer nerds
Should
out
be
there.
endorsed. What is this?
Supertone, if you see this, find my email. But basically, this is a plugin that I use not only in filmmaking, but I think it could be really well used in audio production. A very simple plugin where all it does, it's meant for voice, and this could be either voice in the studio or on location in the field, and it does a really great job using AI algorithms to remove background noise, even the worst background noise. I recently did an interview in a diner. There's like music playing, plates clanging, and then with 3 simple sliders, you could like remove the noise. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, I actually used it as well because you told me.
Yeah.
It's great.
Just makes things sound better. Voice, that is. All right. Well, that was really fun.
Man.
This is a good first episode.
Yeah, super fun. Thank you all for hanging out with us and listening. This is going to be kind of like a regular thing. And also would love to hear if you have any ideas, any thoughts about things that you want us to talk about. We're going to also have a bunch of very, very exciting guests and from a few very cool worlds that you folks probably know as well. So be in the lookout for these. And thank you so much for hanging out. And yeah.
Till next time. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.